This video is going to focus on why abolitionism is actually preferable to the word anarchism. In my other videos, I've talked about how anarchism is not a word that we should necessarily use as much as, say, just reality or freedom, because we recognize that we rule ourselves, since the word anarchon comes from no rulers. And therefore, the only ruler that you have is yourself or God or nature, right? Or, of course, both. Now, this must be understood now in light of abolitionism. So, let's say you were to compare the two. If you say you are an anarchist, well, how is most people going to perceive you? Most likely they're going to think, well, what do you want? You want chaos? You want no rulers? What are you talking about? They may think, oh, well, you're communist, you're socialist, or maybe capitalist, or some other ism that they want to attach to that string, and therefore not only do they have preconceived notions of anarchy, but also of the other ideologies you add onto it, and you sort of lose traction of the moral root to the issue, which is again the fact that you rule yourself, the fact that nobody morally has the right to rule you or morally can tell you what to do with your own life, your own property. Okay, and this is not a capitalist, voluntarist perspective. This is common sense. This is understanding that you own yourself. Simple and practical. And anybody, whether they're communist or socialist, in the right mind would agree that anything involuntary includes violence. And if we can agree government is violence, then violence, again, if it's wrong, would be a moral issue. Everything comes down to morality. And when it comes to, oh, I want things done this way or that way, well, if you're not imposing it on others, then it's not violence, it's just cooperation. There's no need for you to add your string to your anarcho blank. Okay, so let's just keep it at anarchism and focus on that compared to abolitionism. Now, what is abolitionism? If I say I'm an abolitionist, what's going to be the first reaction from people? What do you mean by that? Abolitionism? Are you talking about slavery? So it gets right to the root cause. It first causes a surprise and reaction, which is good. It sparks a lot of question, which is good. They haven't heard of it just yet, of course, until more people do it. And it tells them exactly what you're doing, which is understanding slavery. Whether that be economic slavery, whether that be physical slavery, mental slavery, any of the above, that is a moral issue. It is an issue of ownership. It is an issue of theft. It's an issue of anything of the sort, violence, all these things connected, right? And so violence, violating, this all I go into, of course, in my book, which is called Slavery Gone for Good, Modern Abolitionism. In this, I sort of use as a bridge to say, well, abolitionism is the movement that we have toward freedom, because we have to abolish that which is restricting our freedom, taking it away, so that way the freedom remains with ourselves. It's kind of like saying rights. Now, if you don't believe in this whole notion of rights, that's okay, even though I have a bunch of videos about it. Generally speaking, it's the same thing as freedom, right? You're reclaiming your rights from people who claim to have those rights of you instead, or claim ownership over those rights. So, all those factors considered, abolitionism says this is directly what I stand for and this is directly who I am, and it sparks a reaction of uniqueness. On the other hand, you have anarchism, which sparks a lot of pre-assumed assumptions, and it's kind of broad and out there, and nobody really knows exactly what you're talking about, and it scares most people when they first hear it. So I think it's probably more important to focus on abolitionism. Now you say, Corey, why not just use both? Okay, fine, you can use both. Whatever, what have you. But we shouldn't want to necessarily categorize ourselves with anything anyways. Okay, we need to understand that what we're actually talking about is what we actually want to get done. And we're not just joining it for some ego, some identification. Okay, we're saying, hey, abolitionism, this is a movement. Anarchism, this is a philosophy. You see the difference here. Abolitionism was of the past, was used to help free the slaves from chattel slavery. So if you said modern abolitionism, you're assuming slavery still exists. You're assuming action. What action is in anarchism by itself, other than the fact that you think that no rulers should be present when there is a world full of rulers? There's no action within the terminology. So not only is it flawed by its perception, by its, even when it's used in conjunction with other words, it is just inherently flawed. Whereas, and also, again, nature and freedom are better words for that if you mean just that. But abolitionism says action. It says, hey, I'm tackling something that doesn't need to exist. And the same way as anarchy says no this, well, abolitionism says no slavery. It's essentially saying the same exact thing. No rulers, no slavery. No ownership over people who do not belong to you. No ownership over people who do not belong to you. But which one points more to the action? Which one makes more sense to people? Now you see why I use the word modern abolitionism and why I would use it over anarchy any day of the week, at least when you understand what real anarchism is and you say, well, actually that is abolitionism, because real anarchism is just understanding that, of course, you are free and you're not under the control of another individual. And you do not get to control another individual. Abolitionism is essentially the same thing. So it's up to you which one you want to choose. I'm not going to tell you which one to choose, but based on what I told you, what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose the route that a bunch of people pick and when they want to throw a bunch of fire on the streets, or the route that actually caused change in the past that we're actually continuing because we still have to follow their words? In fact, I got these books that describe how the abolitionists of the past actually had a lot of quote-unquote anarchic ideas, right? Because a lot of them were anarchists. I actually have a whole list of them, and a lot of them were against all forms of human authority, because that was their premises to ending chattel slavery to begin with. If they did not establish ownership, did not establish rights or freedom or one way or another, they would not have a solid ground to say, yes, slavery is wrong, therefore it must be abolished. But that's what they did. And you know what? They also referred to the laws of nature quite often. They may have made appeals to nature, to God, quite often, but you know what? It also worked quite well. And it helped influence people's minds. They did it through education too, and they did it through poetry. They did it through all sorts of different means. They didn't want war. They tried to prevent it as much as possible. Of course, when government gets involved, you expect some war. But we're not dealing with the same type of slavery as back then, and we're in a totally different time, place, and era. So when modern abolitionism must take on the former form of abolitionism, it must keep in account those factors, which includes, well, okay, you're an individual in a world full of knowledge. What do you do with that knowledge in regards to slavery? You understand slavery in all its forms, not limited to chattel slavery. And that is what makes abolitionism, I think, be on the comeback and could be potentially the next biggest philosophy here on Earth, because it is destined for humanity. It was destined for the black man to be free, for the white man to be free, for every race to be free, because we are born to be free. We are free by nature, slaves by government. And so abolitionism is my focus, not anarchism. Nature is my focus, not some other ideology or some one thing. No, I look at the grand scheme of things. Abolitionism focuses on what we must get rid of, and nature says this is what composes of all. So I look at the biggest holistic root picture and the root cause to the problem. Slavery. That's what it is. It's not anything but slavery. What we're talking about when it comes to morality, ownership, freedom, violence, etc. Thank you very much for watching. Corey Mengelat, Nature is the Answer.